During the season of Lent, I'm going to be considering a series of 7 essential questions. You see from the title of this morning's message. Questions about our faith. Regardless of where you believe you fall on the religious spectrum. My idea for this came from a blog from a pastor, Martin Thielen, who wrote a little book called What's the Least I Can Believe and Still Be a Christian? With a title like that, a guide, and then it goes on to say, a guide to what matters most. Both lifelong Christians and people on the edges of the church have some very basic questions, have the same basic questions about life and faith. And Lent, I think, is a great time to explore these questions, leading up to that one big question that is answered on Easter: is there hope for life beyond life, beyond death? But first, I have a preliminary question for each of you. What do you claim as your basic faith perspective? Your basic faith perspective. What do you claim? Are you Hindu? Jewish? Zoroastrian? Are you Christian? Muslim? Or are you a nun? As in no specific faith perspective. I would hazard a guess that most of you here would say that you fall within the broader range of Christian. And if I'm correct, that's good. Because if I'm not, if you don't fall into that, then you can make your way to the coffee hour now. And when I mentioned that to the first service, they said, we'll probably watch out because the sanctuary will empty out. Just the chance to get to the coffee hour first. But I have a question then for those of you who are left in here in the sanctuary. A question that you and I face every day as Christians. Jesus asked it to Peter. Who do you say Jesus is? Who will you, who will me, who will I say that Jesus is? In other words, in our minds, in our hearts, what or who do we truly believe Jesus is? And beyond this, what sort of testimony do we offer about him through our words, through our deeds, by our lives? What will our loved ones, our congregations, our neighbors, our communities know about him because of us? This may be even more difficult to get right than saying the right words about him or believing the proper theological principles about him. Jesus, as I said, presented this question to Peter. And Peter came up with what apparently seemed to satisfy Jesus. He says, you are the Christ. You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. And apparently Jesus said, yes, you got it right, Peter. You got it right. And yet, Peter finds himself rebuked in verse 23 for completely misunderstanding what that answer really means. You got the answer, but you don't understand what it means, Peter. And I think this should serve as a warning to us. We, the faithful followers that we are, may know that Jesus is the one who was sent, the one who took flesh, the one who dwelt with us, the one who suffered and died and was buried, the one who rose on the third day. We declare with our pious lips and very confident hearts that Jesus is the Messiah, the Christ, the beloved child of the Most High. We know the right words. We would be wise, however, to proceed with caution because there is apparently no guarantee, despite the precision and sincerity of our understanding of Christ, that we have a clue about what our confession, Jesus is Lord, actually means. I mean, after all, if Peter got it wrong, and not only did Peter get it wrong, he was rebuked in the strongest terms by being called Satan and a stumbling block to Jesus himself. The one who was the rock on which the church was going to be built all of a sudden became the rock upon which others might stumble. Peter is praised for saying the right thing. And for his faithful testimony, he's named, as I said, the very foundation of Jesus' church, the rock against which not even the forces of death can prevail. Peter is given the keys to free or to bind even the forces, all the forces on earth and all the people on earth. And if Peter gets this wrong, who are we to cavalierly assume that we have it right? To put it another way, why, like Peter, do we sometimes find it so hard to believe that the beloved of God must go to Jerusalem and there undergo great suffering, die, and only then be raised by God to new, everlasting, and glorified life? Surely the one known as the Son of God will be able to reign without threat, will be honored rather than subjected to suffering, will live, not die, will establish a commonwealth of peace and justice rather than be executed as a rebel and a heretic. However, this simply is not the case. But it is also the basis of some consistent and destructive false testimony from some of the best regarded followers of Jesus to this day. We know we live in the post-resurrection world. We know that what Jesus could not accept became true. We know that Jesus went to Jerusalem and confronted both the religious and secular authorities with their arrogance and their exploitive policies and their violence. We know that he was arrested and subjected to both torture and ultimately capital punishment. We know that he was raised and ascended to the heavenly banquet table, and that now he sits at the right hand of God and will welcome us to that feast, all people to that feast. Still, we preach more often than we ought that the faithful will not suffer, but will always prosper, will triumph over every adversity, will win rather than lose occasionally. Yes, we believe that Jesus won the final victory and death's sting has been swallowed up, that our salvation has been wrought and cannot again be lost. Jesus' work may have been done once for all, yet we must avoid Peter's mistake. We must not make what Mary Poppins referred to as pie crust promises, easily made and easily broken. We must not say, God forbid that the righteous suffer, that the saints are killed. Faithful discipleship cannot avoid walking our own roads to Jerusalem and there have our own confrontation with the principalities and powers. Jesus leads us in the way we must go rather than letting us off the hook. That he is Messiah, the beloved of God, makes us members of his body, adopted children of the Most High ourselves. We are participators, not bystanders, in the fulfillment of the promise of his messianic life. Unfortunately, this means we do not stroll along Easy Street, but must march down the streets of economic exploitation to seek new means of exchange through which all may prosper. We are to enter into the halls of power where unjust policies are written and voice the concerns of the voiceless. We are to visit those in prison while working to dismantle judicial systems that locks away so many, especially an unproportionable people of color. We are to welcome strangers, even those we may consider scandalous to our own reputations, and who by their presence will make us a scandal. Look at what others said about Jesus. He hangs out with sinners. He dines with tax collectors and prostitutes. Such was his way. This way of Jesus also, I think, has something more to say to us. Jesus' final rebuke of Peter is that he has set his mind not on divine things, but on human things. And we nod approvingly, yes, that's right, Jesus. We're about the spiritual things. We're not to worry about things of this earth. In this, too, we risk further rebuke. If we trust the whole of Jesus' rebuke of Peter, is it not precisely the avoidance of the tangible and material actions, with its potential for suffering and threat of death, that Peter's mistaken interpretation entails? And does not this demonstrate his all too human mindset? Divine things are not always ethereal, floating above the mundane of life. But those things that involve a vision of justice and liberation, of compassion and mercy, and the ones who really seem to know who Jesus is are those who, like him, are willing to bear the burden of his suffering and death to make his vision real. And by now, I'm sure you've noticed that I haven't really answered today's question for you. Who is Jesus? While this question, for anyone claiming to be Christian, cannot be avoided, I cannot give the answer to you as if it was a quiz and I am the teacher that has the teacher's book. Remember the teacher's book that had the answers in the back? And oh, what fun thought if we could get a hold of that book. You know what? The Bible isn't a teacher's guide with the answers in the back. We have to wrestle with it ourselves. But we do have to wrestle with it. We do have to answer that. It cannot be avoided. Who will we say Jesus is? And truth be told, our answers may rest more with those who are watching and witnessing our lives. And as has been said many times, we may be the only evidence of Jesus some people will ever see. This being the case, what will we be saying with our lives about who Jesus is to us? Whatever it is, it will probably be truer to what we believe than any pious profession we might utter with our lips. Peter found that out. Let us take a lesson from him. Amen.